Hi, this is Dan Halsey with United Designers and Southwoods Ecological Design for the Global Earth Repair Conference, Global Check-In. We are here with Thijs van der Hoeven from the Netherlands to talk to us about what's going on there and his experience and some of the projects that he's working on. Welcome, Thijs. It's very nice to see you again.
Hello. Yeah, it's welcome to see you. Sorry, now it all goes wrong. Wait. No, hello. This is cool to be here.
Thanks very much for taking this time. I see that you have some very nice weather there. You're being outside, so good to take advantage of that. I will get right into this and start asking you about the Netherlands and what's going on there. So our first question for you is, in your experience and your living in the Netherlands and even in Northern Europe, is what do you see as the trends from the past, as what has been happening in climate in the past, and was there any stability at all years ago? What are the trends going forward? And what do you anticipate in your region for climate change?
Yeah, I think what we see up here in the Netherlands, if I remember that when I was young and grew up, we still had very strong winters. And actually we saw in the last 10 years that the winters became, first of all, they started to smoothen out. So the winters weren't that cold anymore. And more now you see that normally we had 4 seasons, and you actually see that nature got a little bit confused. So like now, as I'm sitting outside, normally it shouldn't be that hot as it is right now. And potentially there's still a couple of days ahead of us where it will freeze. And you just see that the whole building up of nature during the spring gets really confused. So you see a big impact on the insects, on the birds, and et cetera, et cetera. So you see now that nature cannot follow anymore her normal climates. And it's just a big experiment to see where this is going to. So I think, first of all, we saw that the edges of it were weakened, so the very cold periods, most likely. And now you see that seasons gets mixed up. And the impact of that is still a bit unknown, as what I said before. And I guess the interesting thing for myself is that by growing up in the Netherlands, of which the majority of the country is below sea level, we were always very much focused on water safety, in that sense of the floodings. And last summer, there was a big drought all in Europe, but for sure in the Netherlands. And you now see that people start realizing that we always kept the Netherlands safe by trying to get rid of our fresh water as quick as possible, because a couple of big rivers are flowing out in the Netherlands. And normally we were just faced by floodings of the rivers and of the oceans. And now we tend to see that after the drought this last summer, everybody starts to realize that the big impact on our agriculture, economy, et cetera, may not be flood anymore, what it used to be, but now may much more be the drought we are facing to. And I guess your last question was, did we had instability? In principle, we did not really had an instability before. We had some severe floods, of course, but for floods you can protect yourself, and the impact of it can be big, but normally will be minor on your weather patterns. And I guess what we see right now is that in the last decades we kept on lowering our groundwater tables to be able to go on with bigger machines on our lands to produce food. And I guess now for the first time, everybody starts to realize is if we're going to lower our groundwater tables, it has an impact on the weather and on other climate systems. And I think there now everybody slowly starts understanding, and that's a paradigm shift, as I may call it, is that we have to understand that if we want to protect our country from water safety, but also from the drought, we have to keep as much as there was possible and only let it go if we have a sufficient groundwater tables. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges of the Netherlands, to let go of a system where we're known of in the world, our water management very much focusing on water safety. And we now have to understand that for climate, there's a much bigger role for the water, and we need to keep it as much as possible during the drought periods, to be able to have the sea moisture coming back into our land. And the big impact on the economy is the drought, and is not the flood in that sense.
I see. So they basically the paradigm shift that you're saying is people have to think differently now about water, that it's something that needs to be stored and not removed as much as possible. How does that affect the land practices and working on the land when people are farming or with agriculture?
Well, I guess that's part of the paradigm shift. As one of the facts where we know is that the Netherlands is one of the biggest agricultural producers of the world. And I think everybody now really starts to see the impact of it. And if you looked at the soil carbon content of the Netherlands in the last decades, it really got reduced to maybe 1 or 2% on an average. And if we start to understand, and this is what we try to do with our projects, is to show that if you raise your soil organic carbon content, it has many beneficial impacts. And one of the things is that it's rather rainy in the Netherlands in one of these days. And if you're able to restore that sponge functioning of your soil, you can harvest much more of that rainfall and put it back into your groundwater tables. Now, the interesting thing is there that, of course, in the Netherlands, they try to do that with policies, but a lot of the times it becomes the governmental institutes trying to dictate to farmers what they need to do. And what we're now trying to show and do it on a couple of projects by practice is to give the farmer back the tool where he can store water during a flood, where he can harvest the rainwater by raising his groundwater tables. And by doing it, you create a much fertile soil of which the sponge functioning is much better. And that goes two ways. That also means that he can lower his groundwater table if he has to manufacture his land well ahead. And this is what we try to bring back and actually show that the integrated functions of the land, you need to bring them together and give the persons who eat from the land, so the farmers who own the land, you need to give them the financial benefits if they do something for the society on a larger picture. And this is what we're trying to do. And well, the projects will start up there. But having said that, you can understand that the problem sometimes with the holistic approach of land use is that you need to touch a lot of different institutes of the government. So it does take a bit more time.
I see. Thank you. So our second question then is, with climate change adaptation, you've talked about it already, I believe, but of the different practices, which I'm sure there are many different solutions you're working on, what's the most important for climate adaptation as you see the changes coming?
I think one of the most important thing is we have to understand the role of water in a land or in an ecosystem. And just to give you the example, if you see that a dry land cannot get rid of her energy, so what she does is she will start heating up the land, and this will create thermal flows. And these thermal flows, on a small scale, they don't change that much on the weather, but if you look at the bigger impact in the large areas, it definitely will change the transport capacity of moisture which is evaporated on the ocean towards your land. So I guess one of the things is what we're now trying to set up in a practical, scientific way, and also trying to create that in regions, is to show the people, if you're able to raise your groundwater tables, much more of your solar energy is being absorbed by evaporation of the moisture. And one of the persons, or one of my mentors is Milan, and he's from Spain. And he actually showed me that the function of water to transport energy towards the higher parts of a complete watershed makes it rain, and the rain comes back to flush the land. And I guess we all have to understand that to have water available to absorb that solar energy, there's one thing we need to recover quickly, is the vegetation. And his saying, which I like, is water begets water, and vegetation is the midwife. And I think if we start understanding the role of vegetation, how to positively have an effect on the water cycle, we can be optimistic. because in principle, the vast changes we see now happening around us tells me one thing: we need to act. But what it does as well is that by bringing back that water, we can also change it rapidly into a more positive system back again.
Right, right. So it's the hydrological cycle that we need to manage with trees, plants, transpiration, all of that, keeping the system going.
Yep.
Right, most of which has been removed, of course, in many of our regions. So then what is as you see these going forward, and I know that you're very much in touch internationally and especially in the region that you're in, and as you're kind of seeing the pulse of where this is all headed, what do we need to do either as a globe or as a nation to avoid a climate tragedy? And I know you talked a little bit about the most important adaptations, but in society or with government, what do you think we need to do to avoid a global or economic climate tragedy?
Well, I think, and we have spoken about this before, I changed my life, what is now almost 3 years ago, where I simply got a request for a lake in Egypt, and where everybody was talking about terrorist groups securing the air simply because of the fact that the ecosystem was in a state of collapse. I used to work for a dredging company, which was mainly busy with destruction of ecosystems. And the moment I got in touch myself by the force of nature and by what we could do by restoring ecosystem, I changed myself. And I guess we cannot force anybody to change. We can only show the good examples of it and what it also does to you as a human being. So first of all, I think we need to stand up all together and just show the positive effects, but also try to show together what everybody is doing. You can already show that impact, because a lot of people say, for sure also here in the Netherlands, if you hear the discussions about climate change, one of the biggest arguments you get not to react is that everybody says, yeah, but we only have a minor impact. Well, I guess the minor impact is not true if we show what all of the people around the world who I have met in the last 2.5 years, if we try to show together our positive effects. So whether it's carbon sequestration or whether it's soil fertility or whether it's productivity, I think we need, and this conference for that is a beautiful thing, is we need to stand up and together say what we're all working on, because then I think we're able to show that if we work together, we can do a lot of the stuff. And I guess the other thing, what we need to do, and that was a bit the struggle, I guess, we were having with the weather makers, because I was coming from this dredging industry. Now, when I started to analyze together with all of the people who I've met, a lot of the times is the industries that now have a tremendous negative effect that we could change to be one of the biggest positive effect industries, and that can actually start supporting all of these different projects. We're trying to build up or deliver organic material, deliver impermeable soils, so we can retain water, deliver with all the science we now have, the right strategy to start working together with nature and start regreening on a much more profound way, which I guess we can if we all work together. And I think the last one, and it's just purely by luck in a personal way, and it sometimes feels a bit as a heavy task to fulfill, but I guess 2.5 years ago, we got requested by Egypt regarding the Sinai and the regreening of it. And as being a bit naive at that time, I simply could not see, and the people who I have met also encouraged it, we could not see why we could not regreen a desert. But by working on it, we also realized that not only in a watershed there are certain points you need to focus on, but worldwide there are several kind of connecting points which bring together encatchment basins. And if we start focusing by building up the knowledge on all the projects we are doing, but focusing on an international way with our industries to support regreening activities on certain points, it could have a massive impact and a much more positive impact on what we think. And let me just give you one trigger. I think if we all realize that climate change and global warming are in principle two different definitions, that will open up. And what I mean to say with it, global warming is what we're currently doing, completely destroying our ecosystems, which will reduce the water availability in the land, so we'll turn up to heat up this land and create global warming. Now, climate change has to do with disturbed water vapor distributions globally. And I think this opens up another room. With other words, this means that if we focus on the right points in the world, we could change regional/global wind patterns much more easier than we currently think.
So what I've been seeing too, and some of the research and also watching the videos that are now of different projects, is that they've actually, nature is responding to some of these projects much faster than people anticipated. As soon as the trees go in, as soon as, well, like, you know, what they're saying with the keystone species being put back into ecosystems, the rapid change that happens, because it's actually the animals that create the ecosystem, which is not what anybody was thinking. They manage it. And when we bring in the plants and we bring in the different species, of course, they themselves have a feedback loop and can make these changes. So do you think that the actual amount of work that it would take to make these changes is much less than people think? Do they think that it's this huge, grandiose project? Or do you think that actually we just need to basically reboot some of these systems and give them the resources to repair themselves?
That's an interesting question. I think one of the other mentors was John Todd, who I've met via John Liu, 1.5 years ago. And the interesting thing is, when we were starting up to build up kind of business models to understand how to restore an ecosystem, we realized that the more plants or animals we put into it, the less vulnerable your business plan became of one assumption of a certain species. So there you already saw that if you use biodiversity in the same way as nature does, it very much helps you to build up a robust plan to start that regreening or restoring of ecological function in a larger way. Then the other thing was, one of the first things where we just came in, because I was an engineer, in a simplistic way to do it. What I also realized, and a lot of the arguments we got back, is that people said, well, but you don't understand natural complexity. So you don't know exactly how to build up. And then at a certain moment, our argument back to them was like, okay, but so we shouldn't do anything. And then I've met John Todd. And John Todd came up with his eco engine, where you actually got, and it's based upon aquatics, you got a couple of cylinders. And what I was doing in my models, to try just to have a feeling myself whether the growth we saw coming out of our business plan was good or not, we used just the energy. We started to look at an energy influx in these systems. And this is exactly what John Todd was doing, and he learned me. He said, "These don't even try to understand natural complexity, because the positive feedback loops are unheard of. We don't know how to manage the cooperation of an ecosystem." He said, you just have to be aware what life wants, what nature wants. And for a dredger, that's rather simple in a lot of times. Because if you want to restore a lake with a certain flushing, we can do that. I don't know which fish will flourish in that system, but I know how to improve the quality which will support that life. So I think, to answer your question, is if we think logically, and whether it's sun, whether it's flowing water, whether it's the flushing of the tides of an aquatic ecosystem, if we manage to create the best life circumstances, life will surprise us in a tremendous way. And I think that was the interesting thing when we started on By the Wheel. What I did as being an engineer from the marine part, we always look at the hindcast calculations. And if we looked at what life used to be there with very minor changes, it was massive. Where if you would ask persons to try to determine what life could be there, it would always be much, much less. But this is a little bit our Western world risk kind of thinking. And I think what I like about that ecosystem, I never felt so secure in modeling it and predicting it, because I know one thing for sure: it will always be better than you can predict, because we have lived from, if you ask me, I think 5,500 years before Christ up till now into a system in decline. We cannot simply imagine in our own DNA what a system which goes up will bring us. So yes, I think it can and will recover much quicker than we can think.
Right. Well, thank you for that. That's we appreciate your insights on that, and also the importance of talking to other people, and the fact of working with John Todd or John Liu. These systems actually come from basically an integrated thinking, also with all these different disciplines and people, and also the creativity and understanding that if it is beyond us even to understand, then perhaps all we need to do is help the structure, because it is smart enough to repair itself. We need to put back those things that will give it the resources that we've taken away, rebuilding those structures so that nature can reboot itself in an accelerated pace, for sure. Well, thank you for that. And then, did you have any other presentation or anything else that you'd like to show us?
Yeah, I got a little presentation. Let me just... What?
I'm planning to present that in Washington. Are you sure you want to do that now?
Yeah, if you're going to present it, that's fine for me, as long as it is on the conference.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm going to.
Yeah. Okay. No, but then I think, because otherwise it might take
the preempting. Okay.
Yeah, but if somebody's going to present it, then
it'll be online then with the conference with the other information. I'm sure.
But we just need to.
We need to coordinate a little bit.
Yeah, but I can. Well, what we can still do, I can still try to do it within 10 minutes.
Okay.
And then you can. Maybe
we won't show these. We won't show these before the sessions anyway.
Okay. So, John, can you? Maybe I will just do it.
Introduce John Liu to our.
Yeah. Otherwise, you now join me, and you can tell.
Well, no, you can.
Okay.
What you can do is you can share.
But how do I share that?
Well, you go down to the bottom.
Okay, wait here. I think I know.
But do you have the ability to share, or do you have to get permission from the?
Oh, it's good.
Okay.
We're on it.
Now, is it now sharing?
It's loading up.
Yeah, but I think it's
what you need to do
loading up.
is you need to.
Hi, John.
Hi. Hi. So wait a minute. Hard to see out here in the sunlight.
Yeah, there it is underneath.
For
some reason it doesn't.
Using Skype or what is this? What? Using Skype? What is that about?
So I have on the screen right now is just a line that says regreening the Sinai PowerPoint.
That's already more than we have. Otherwise, stop share and try to reshare it again.
Yeah. Okay, show share.
It's in it.
John Liu, everyone. There we go. Okay, lost you again.
Share. What am I doing? Share.
Now you stop video.
I don't know. I can't see.
Yeah, and then...
Oh no, we.
Yeah, and then there's share.
Let's share.